Welcome to Building Australia. On today's show, we're going to look at the main types of windows, in particular high performance windows. Today we're joined with Andre from Bink Windows, the sponsor of today's show. Let's get going.
Sounds good.
So Andre, tell us a bit about Bink Windows. What are the main types of windows you guys are producing these days?
Okay, so we started manufacturing doors and windows about 16 years ago.
Yep.
And at that stage, we started manufacturing bifold doors just because they were all the rage.
Yeah, they were popular 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah,
everyone had bifolds.
Every house had to have one, right?
Yeah.
And so that was our entry into the market. What we found was that pretty quickly, clients that would buy bifold doors from us also wanted a couple of windows to finish off their renovation. So we started buying and selling windows, but pretty quickly we realized that the stuff that we were buying and selling really, even for our untrained eye at that stage, because we were very, very fresh into this.
Yeah.
And to be completely honest with you, I couldn't have told you the difference between one window or another, right? That's how little I knew about it. And we realized that the quality that was generally produced was pretty low.
It's come a long way.
Absolutely. I mean, bearing in mind, the standards were only introduced about 16, 17 years ago, right?
Yeah, and for a long time, you pretty much only had timber, aluminium.
Correct.
Those were your sort of two choices in Australia. It's been the last 15, 20 years. We've seen more modern windows coming in from Europe.
100%. And of those two as well, what was there was a pretty basic design. I would say things that we inherited from the UK from 100, 200 years ago. And then not a lot had changed since then, right? And I'm not trying to be rude about it, but that's just what happened. It just didn't evolve. And so what that meant for us was we, first of all, we just weren't happy with what we were selling our clients because we just felt like we ought to be supplying them something much better. And the second thing also was, we're running a business and we saw that as a fantastic opportunity, right, to present something to the market. And so our position was that we wanted to produce a high quality door and a window at an honest price. And that started our journey really. And then from that, we very quickly developed our own suite of timber doors and windows. Invested heavily in R&D, including multiple trips to Europe, which is the market that we consider to produce some of the best windows in the world.
It's still the standard, isn't it?
100%. They really do set the standard, right? They're very, very progressive and have been doing it very well for a very long time. So we leverage that, and so we travel there frequently, look at what they're doing how they're doing it, the reasons they're doing it. And really, what we did was we imported that knowledge as best as we can, and pretty quickly we introduced a high performance timber window, which is called the tilt and turn window.
Very familiar with them.
Yep. So
now Bink have timber,
yes,
PVC,
yes,
and Alclad. Is that correct?
Alclad. Almost there.
Almost there, almost coming next year, perhaps.
Second half of next year, we'll be live with the Alclad.
Yeah. So just going back a little bit to the history of windows, what we used to have, timber and aluminium, they were your two options. I guess it's probably worth to sort of unpack those a little bit and look at some of the pros and cons of the alley versus the timber. The alley had the durability, but the terrible thermal performance.
Correct.
Then you got your timber, which still lives on now. Great thermal performance. The durability is a bit of an issue, but easy to overcome. As we've seen in other videos, we've discussed that. But PVC is a bit more of a recent entrant to the market. Let's have a little talk about that.
So PVC actually entered our market quite a while ago, but again, our market, generally speaking, just doesn't really have, broadly speaking, doesn't really have that level of expertise and experience. And so it was very new, and that knowledge just wasn't here for us to know any better. And so a lot of the early entrants into the market, they didn't really bring the correct product type into our market. It was an imported product,
and there was for a while. Correct. I do recall you had some of these PVC windows that they weren't UV stabilized.
Correct.
They did everything that you'd expect a window to do, but you could see they got chalky and powdery in the Australian sun. But that, from my experience, was 15 years ago.
Correct.
And some of those were coming out of China, not necessarily Europe, so you had no control over the PVC product.
Yep.
Now, UV stabilized is the standard.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we need to understand is that around the world, I mean, the climatic conditions are very, very different. And so you really do have to cater specific to that climate.
Yep.
Even in Australia, you can't just cater, you can't just have one solution that covers all of Australia. It just doesn't work.
This is actually one of the hardest things about building in Australia. When you're trying to pick a standard that's a national standard, it's got to meet hot, dry climate in Tasmania and Victoria, and then it should meet the same specifications or requirements for the alpine regions.
Yeah, correct.
It's not going to be able to do that.
And then you've got certain climates that are very, very wet, very humid. So you really do need to be able to cater for all of that, right? And so understanding that, I think, was the first part. And I think I'm very confident to say now that our market, our industry understands that the industry doesn't make those mistakes anymore. They're very much a thing of the past. So we have, as you pointed out before, we have windows now, UPVC windows that are properly UV stabilized for our high levels of UV exposure in Australia.
Yeah, and the other thing about the PVC, I won't go into too much detail about it, but the thermal conductivity of all these different materials changes vastly.
Sure.
If we're looking at this value, like timber, for example, is only 0.18. That's the measure for thermal conductivity. That's a hardwood product. The aluminium is up at 200, which is multitudes higher. Like in comparison, it's hundreds of times more conductive of heat in summer and the same heat leaving your building in winter. And then PVC is, what have we got there for PVC?
0.14.
0.14 for PVC. So again, right down there. The other part of all this that's evolved so much in the last 10 years is window manufacturers getting on board to say, well, here's a window, but here's how to install it. Here's how to get those ultimate U values in your window when you install it. Because that's the other big failure with a lot of windows is they could be the best windows in the world, but installed incorrectly, it's almost for nothing. And that's the other thing I find with the more progressive window companies like Bink is that we're getting a suite of windows, but we're getting solutions to how to actually install it. And I know you guys go out on site a lot and actually view these installations and share this information. That's a big, reform in the industry as well the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, look, I think, what you said there really hits the nail on the head because it's not just a product. It's not a discrete product that you can simply sell. It's not something you just literally buy off the shelf.
That's not the same for every project either.
Correct. So there really ought to be a lot of thought behind the process. So you have to assess what the project requirements are. And I've got to stress that it's got to be the project requirements, okay? Because every project has its own little subtle differences.
And client needs.
Correct.
Those two things often overlooked. But if you can look at what does the client want, how do they want to live, what's the project like, what's the aspect like, what are we trying to achieve, especially when it comes to passive house certification, we need all those things to line up. So that flexibility and that input from a window company is becoming critical to the whole project.
So we'll look at the entire end-to-end process. So we start at the start by assessing the requirements of the project. We match that to a suite of products, and often it's a combination. And what we try to do in that process, we try to educate our clients as best as possible so that they can make an informed decision. We don't try to sell windows. We try to provide information. And if we provide information well, then we're confident that our clients will make an informed decision.
And they can also change things up within the project and say, okay, we've got our window budget set at 80K. What we're looking at here has come out in over 100,000, but changing things around a bit, you can still meet the window budget, which is a pretty important thing to set early on too, I reckon, because the windows are the one thing that you can't change. You won't change it once you've finished. You can retile a bathroom, you can get new curtains, you can even change a bench top, but the windows, they're part of the fabric of the house. So good discussions to have early on.
I think for sure they're part of the building fabric, and the other thing too is they are proportionately a large portion of the build cost.
As much as 10%.
Correct. So you really do want to spend a lot of time working out do you have the right window solution and door solution for your house? Because it's in there for a long time, right? You can't easily, or you don't want to swap it in and out. It's an expensive exercise.
Yeah, people just won't.
Yeah, correct.
They know the cost of doing that afterwards. They're getting nothing back on their windows except literally skip bins. They're just going to pay for that. So it just doesn't happen. So those choices early on are really critical. They're worth lots of emails and lots of conversations. I sort of encourage people to sort of think around that 10% mark to set aside for your windows. And if there's any doubt, bump that up to 11% and take 1% off somewhere else. It's easy to do, especially when it's something like paving or it's, curtains is a great example because you can do that anytime. Yeah. Should we have a look at some of the samples you've got there?
Yeah,
Andre?
Sure. Yep. What would you like to look at first?
Well, I think probably the PVC, because the PVC is the one that's available now. It's pretty widely used. We've used this window on a number of projects now. What's the big difference between this and a conventional window, apart from the fact that we're double or triple glazed? What's the big difference with these windows?
Well, I think this is probably a really good segue for me to completely nerd out on some of the science of this, right?
Nerd away.
So first thing is I'm not a scientist and I don't understand the science at that level.
And there's a lot to know.
There is.
It's often a new client's going to come to me and totally nerd out on some detail about windows, like the lambda values, for example. There's a lot to know. So yeah, do your best.
Correct. What I do is I try to understand this in the most practical way possible, so that I can convey that practical information to our clients. Okay. So the first thing that you want to look at on a door or a window is the actual material that the window is made out of. So that's the window frame. That's the window sash. So that's typically the part that opens up. The material that it's made out of is very important. As you mentioned before, aluminium is not a very good material to use for doors and windows because of its thermal conductivity. So what does that mean? So my basic understanding is energy travels from one side to the other side. And if you have something that's highly conductive, that energy transfers very, very quickly and very easily without any resistance at all. That's not good, because if you've got heat on the inside, that heat touches that surface, then it makes its way through there very, very quickly and it loses the heat out on the other end. And vice versa, in summer, for example, all the heat on the outside comes in through and heats up your house on the inside. So all the energy and the dollars that we're spending heating and cooling is being diminished, okay? So that's the first thing. Now that applies to the frame material as well as the sash material. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the glass. So you can see here we're showing an example of double glazing. So very quickly, double glazing is two bits of glass that is bonded together with this, what they call a spacer bar, and then there's another bit of a seal that runs here as well.
Even the spacer has been considered as well. Typically, we would have had aluminium spacers, which again are a big no-no. It's probably the thing I'm going to talk about the most with any sort of building materials, because it's the one no-no you want in a house, really. Conventional double glazing has an aluminium spacer, again, transfers heat. These look like the Swiss spacer or the EPS.
Yeah, so the spacers that we use as standard, which are, by the way, generally available in our market now.
Yeah,
we were one of the clients that really sort of pushed for it and tried to influence that change, and it's happened. So we're rapt that it has happened, and it is, as a standard, available.
You do have to ask for it.
You have to ask for it.
Yeah, and at the moment, I know Viridian make the TPS, which is a thermoplastic spacer. There's probably another manufacturer.
Yeah, so we use AGG, so a quick plug for AGG. And I do that not because for any other reason apart from the fact that they're a solid supplier in the market and they have been supporting us for the last
and they do a lot
amount of time.
R&D, obviously very proactive.
Very proactive, and they were the ones that really came on board with this warm edge spacer in a big way, and they standardized it for us. And by the way, cost no extra. We just have to ask for it. So as you pointed out, the spacer is very important, and again, it's about reducing the conductivity. So it's reducing the rate at which energy will transfer from one side to the other. So in this example here, two bits of glass separated by this low conductivity spacer and sealed to make sure moisture doesn't get in or out. And that is a double glazed unit. So again, there are things that you can do to improve the performance, and by that, meaning the transfer of energy from one side to the other side, heat and cold. Okay. One other thing as well is, by default and standard, we have this spacer filled with argon gas.
Yeah, not a vacuum seal, which is how double glazing started in Australia, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
A long time
while
ago.
Correct.
If you look at an old house with double glazing, we're going to call them DGUs, just to be quicker. They had a vacuum seal, and they used to do that, and the image was distorted. Argon takes care of all of that.
Yeah. So argon, it's an inert gas. So it's a completely harmless gas. In fact, deep sea divers use it. What that does is it improves the insulation in here. You can't see anything. It's a gas, but again, it's about retarding the process of energy transfer from one side to the other side. So all of these things together improve the performance of that glass. Now, you'll hear us talking about this thing called a U value and an SHGC. They're two measurements that we use to determine how well a certain an element or glass or frame, how well it performs. So by having argon gas, we get a 0.1 improvement in UG, in the U value. And by having a warm edge spacer, we get another 0.1 improvement. So all these things, they all add up.
They all add up. It's basically, if you like, this package, this suite of measures, all of which are gaining just small amounts on their own, not enough to talk about. But as a package, you're putting all this stuff together and you're potentially halving U values. And again, cost really isn't there in the manufacturing. It's the R&D and pushing for the right types of glazing. So just quickly, Andre, what about these little cavities in there? Are they significant to the thermal qualities of the window?
Yeah, so let's first of all show you what we're talking about.
This is something you wouldn't get in a conventional window.
Correct. So each one of these is they call it a chamber, and there's multi-chambers in there. The reason that they do that, one of the reasons is it provides a strength. The other reason is, rather than having a solid block of PVC, having this chamber type structure reduces the amount of PVC that's used. But the benefits also is, by having these multiple chambers, it improves the thermal conductivity, but also improves the acoustic insulation as well. So they're the very high level reasons why they do it. As I said, not a scientist, don't understand the actual science behind it, but I know enough that that's what it does, and that's why it's good.
And I think this is one of those little hidden advantages with high performance windows, particularly anything that's Passive House certified, is they're getting up to the level of almost soundproof. It's sort of like a bonus with any of these things. I mean, you can see the way the windows seal, the way they're manufactured, and the way they're installed. You're getting almost like a studio type construction that's close to soundproof.
Look, I'm always very careful about acoustic insulation, right? Because
it's a bonus. It's not a guarantee.
And it's very much it can be a very biased outcome. Okay, and what I mean by that is sound that's noticeable or that would annoy me, it's not necessarily going to be the same sound that's going to be noticed or that'll annoy you. Okay, and so it can be measured for sure, and the acoustic insulation that we would get out of these systems is very, very good. Okay. But we're just going to be careful about sound, calling it soundproofing. It's not a soundproof studio, but the volume of sound that comes through would be significantly reduced. It would create for a very peaceful environment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big focus is the thermal performance, making it airtight. The bonus off to the side really is that reduction in external noise.
Can I also just point one other thing out, which often is missed? It's not spoken about, and I don't think our market really understands it or knows a lot about it. So we've covered the first two things, which is the material type for the frame of the sash and then the glass. So all of these things stop transfer of energy. The other way that energy transfers is through the gaps. So you can see here, hopefully, we've got gaskets there and there. So when you've got these two solid objects that close together, you need to close that gap, and that gap is closed up by gaskets. So those gaskets are called compression gaskets. They're literally the gaskets compressed like that, and then it stops or significantly reduces, in this case air, but air and water. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you have a window that has really good glass, really good material, but doesn't have any gaskets, and if the air leaks through, I would argue that that's the most important element in your doors and windows.
It's a bit like a fridge door.
100%.
You know, whenever you close a fridge door, it's got a bit of thickness to it so that it can't twist and distort. And when it closes onto the actual fridge, you know it's sealed all around. If it wasn't, your fridge would be running all the time.
That's right.
And it's similar to these windows where if these windows aren't sealing tight, your air conditioner or your heating is going to be running all the time. So that's what we're always ultimately trying to do is bring that heating and cooling need down as close to zero as possible.
So the industry terminology for that is air infiltration. And so the three things that you need to ask about your windows is your U value, which is how well the window insulates the internal climate.
Yep, the resistance.
Yep.
So in this case, the U value is your conductivity.
Yep.
The R value, which most people are more familiar with in terms of insulation, is the thermal resistance. So U is the opposite of the R value.
Yep.
And then, sorry, go on.
That's all right. So then you've got U value. The second thing is SHGC. So it's an acronym that stands for Solar Heat Gain Coefficient. So the SHGC, it's a little bit trickier because...
Very specific to Windows as well. No one else really uses this.
Yeah, and the SHGC, lower or higher is not better or worse.
You actually want a little bit of both when you want it.
Yeah, what you want to do is, so for us in Melbourne or Hobart, so Vic or Tas, we typically want a moderate SHGC, so somewhere up around about 0.5.
Yep.
Very quick explanation. The SHGC is represented as a decimal number, so 0.1 to 0.9, for example, or 1. What that means is it is a percentage of the heat that transfers from the outside to the inside.
Yep.
So if we have an SHGC of 0.5, that means 50% of the radiant heat is transferring through. Okay. So with that in mind, in Melbourne, we typically want something that's moderate because we want that heat gain in winter to help to heat the house up.
But not in summer.
But not in summer.
Yeah.
Okay. So typically, a really good design in Melbourne is to have a moderate SHGC on your glass, but you have eaves because the eaves will give you the protection in summer, or natural shading, or any other kind of shading for the
Or
window.
fixed awnings is the other way that we've done this before, where we want a big window facing north because that's where the view is. Trouble is in summer, that's going to bring too much heat in. So in that case, we've got a fixed awning. And then depending on location and time of year, that awning is going to block all that heat gain in summer.
Correct. And then you also consider the north, south, east, west elevation of the particular house. Typically, your north and your west, you have a much higher risk of overheating. Your south and your east is a much lower risk.
Not so bad,
So you'd have to take those into consideration. And then, of course, if you're living in some of the northern parts of Australia, so north of Sydney, Queensland, etc., those climates are typically more about the cooling load. So it's more about keeping the house cool than keeping the house warm. So in that instance, you actually want a lower SHGC window.
And it's all the same science and numerical values that apply. They just apply them differently. So I think that's actually an interesting point. A lot of people think that when it comes to, say, passive house, for example, that it's the sort of thing you'd only worry about in cold climates. No, but it's not the case.
Not at all.
All that science, all that data, all the R&D in Windows applies to hot climates as well, just as with the same benefit.
Yeah. And in fact, some of these typical warmer climates, like for example, Mildura, I was speaking to a client there.
Hot and dry.
Hot and dry, and very, very cold at night. Right. So you're kind of copying it on both ends. So there's really a much bigger justification for passive houses in those climates than in some of the other places, right? So,
it's funny you say that. I actually noticed a lot more passive house projects out to the west. There's lots around Ballarat, Dalesford,
for sure.
And then a little bit further north up towards Wangaratta, those sort of areas. I've seen a few, and they do have the extreme climates. It'll go from 40 during the day to possibly 5 or 6 at night. You get everything,
Correct.
Should we have a look at the the Alclad window as well.
Sure. Yeah. All right, we'll put this aside for a second.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me.
So, this is what we would, the industry calls an Alclad window. So it's a composite window.
I think it ticks all the boxes.
It does.
Probably the most expensive.
It is because it's got the most amount of material and the most amount of labor to fabricate it. So, first of all, I guess an Alclad window is basically, it's a full timber window. So you can see we have a full timber frame like you would do normally, a full timber sash, again, like you would do normally. Difference is, on the outside, we fit this aluminium cladding. So in doing that, what you're getting on the inside, which is where you spend most of your time looking at your windows, you're looking at this beautiful natural timber. It looks fantastic, makes everyone feel warm and fuzzy about themselves, and you can do all kinds of things to it. You can have it clear, you can paint it, do whatever you want.
And this can be done off-site too, can't it?
Yep.
If someone wants to paint a timber window, you guys can do that in the factory before they're installed. Or if they're going to be clear, they can be clear coated in the factory before they come out. Is that still an option?
Correct. It is an option.
Which you don't get with any other window manufacturer.
Yeah, and I think that's a real shame actually, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just a very, very quick comment. I think doors and windows should not leave the factory uncoated.
No.
Now, we have to perform and behave in the industry that we're in, and so we have an offer where you can get your windows without a coating, because that's what the market's used to. But we always try and encourage our clients to get it coated by us. It's usually not a price-driven decision.
No.
Usually the reason why our clients will say, I don't want you to do it, is because the particular type of coating, the finish or whatever it is not something that we offer. And therefore clients say, well, I'll take it raw and I'll do it myself. But if there is a finish or a color that they like that we produce, almost always our clients will take us up on the offer.
And it's not going to be any more expensive. Whether you pay a painter on site to climb up and down ladders and paint windows, or whether you do it in a factory, the cost difference isn't really even worth talking about.
Look, often it's more cost effective to have us do it. And the finish that we achieve will be better than a painter can achieve, and that's not disparaging a painter. It's just we have a better crack at it.
You have a better environment for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, because if we were to paint that, we would paint it without the glass, without the aluminium, without the gaskets, without anything on it.
Which is quick and easy.
Yeah, and we can get into everything, and we can spray the top coat on, which is what we do.
You have an opportunity to paint areas on the window that the painter could never get to.
Correct. And because we can do that and spray it on, we get a much better finish. I mean, you can look at that. That is a very nice finish. Whereas when you do it on site, you have to either roll it on or brush it on. And it's not as good.
So the pros and cons of the Alclad window, obviously you've got the durability from the outside because you've got an aluminium front, which, by the way, I think it's probably important to mention that aluminium front is attached. It's not conducting, is it?
Nope.
It's just there is a hard, durable coating.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because we spoke before and we were explaining how bad aluminium is. Almost counterintuitively, in this instance, what you will see is that the aluminium is held on. Hopefully, you can see that by a plastic clip, and there's also space between the aluminium and the timber. That actually,
so they're not touching. You've got an air gap, which is saying, right, we're not going to allow any heat to transfer.
So what actually happens is, and again, in very, very layman's terms, because I'm not a scientist, in winter, the winter sun will hit that and it'll warm that up. And that pocket actually warms up. And so what it's doing is it's actually keeping that particular part of the timber surface warmer than it would otherwise be if it didn't have that aluminium on.
It might only be 1 or 2 degrees, but it's all working in your favor.
Correct.
Yeah. So I guess one of the cons may be this is probably the most expensive window suite, isn't it?
It is.
But you're getting, the way I see it anyway, you're getting everything with an Alclad window. You're getting the durability, the flexibility of the material choices, the look. For me, I'll always go for timber. I think it's nice to be able to see and feel and touch timber in your house. And also at the end of its lifespan, which you hope with a house, the sort of house this is going to go into is going to be close to 100 years. But when that day comes, you strip out the timber and that is easily recyclable. compared to most of the other materials out there, particularly aluminium, it's very easy to recycle. Less energy goes into the recycling of timber, and the impact on the environment is almost zero.
Yeah, it's a completely renewable product. And these days, the forestry industries, the timber mills, they really are very active in that space. Look, of course, there's more that they can do, and there's more that we would like them to do. But they're already doing a pretty good job, and I think we just need to allow them to keep improving on that, like everyone else.
Yeah. And as always, the market drives these things. If more people are pushing for that, industries will pop up and companies will pop up to cater to that.
What I'd just like to make a quick comment, if I may. I say this to my clients all the time. There is no perfect solution, okay, with windows, because there isn't any one window system that ticks all the boxes. That's why I said at the very start, having the discussions with our clients up front and understanding what their requirements are and understanding the project requirements are is very important, because that allows us to find the most suitable window system. What I tell my clients is, make a list of all the things that you would like. Then of all those things,
what's the priority?
Decide which ones are deal breakers. Because for some clients, they'll say, look, I want the lowest possible maintenance on the outside, on the window.
That comes up a lot too.
Correct. So if that's the case, then let's not look at all timber windows.
You've got 1, 2 out of 3. You've focused into there.
Correct. And then other clients will say, look, the budgets, we have to value manage this project. Okay, well, in that case, maybe the Alclad's not the solution for you. Let's look at PVC. So you do have to look at that and work out what your deal breakers are. Tick those boxes, and then everything else, by definition, is discretionary. And you tick off as many of those discretionary points as you can. And at the end of that process, you will find that you will have a solution that is pretty close to being ideal.
And there are actually a lot more stakeholders in this than you'd think. You might have a BAL rating, which typically where we build, we've almost always got a BAL rating. So that limits our choice down to 2 out of 5 or 3 window options. The architect has a certain aesthetic that they're going for. The client has their needs and wishes in terms of what they want to look at and look through every day when they're living in the house. And also then there's the aspect, which way are we facing? Is the house predominantly facing north or east? So there's a lot of factors that come into play. But look, having the choice is the best start you can have too.
I think so. There are some projects where you just wouldn't put a PVC window or an aluminium window. It's a beautiful period charm, and it needs timber windows. It's got to have timber windows. Other clients just love the idea of it. They just love looking at timber windows, and that's what they ought to get. And then, and on the other end of the spectrum, I'll have clients that say, had a bad experience with my timber windows, don't ever want timber windows again. What have you got? Say, okay, well, here's some options. So got to work out what's a deal breaker.
And the other thing is that we've got a project coming up where we're actually going to have 2 different types of windows going into it, where we're going to have timber to meet the council requirements for the heritage overlay on the front 2 windows. And they'll still be high performance windows, but they need to be timber and look a certain way. But then we're going to have to use a different suite of windows out the back, which is the modern extension. And this is still a good outcome because we can achieve everything we need to in terms of the thermal performance, and in this case, council requirements.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's also worth noting that with timber windows, I don't like using the phrase durability on timber windows. It can be misunderstood.
Still requires.
I think it's maintenance. So for me, a timber window will require more maintenance than a PVC or an aluminium window. But if you look at all 3 options, and if all 3 options have been designed and fabricated very well, all 3 of them are as equally durable as the next. But for sure, the timber will require more frequent maintenance.
And I think also on that note, the timber windows, the mistake a lot of people make is it'll get 3 coats of paint when it's first constructed, and then people do nothing for 10 years.
Look, it's like having a beautiful timber deck and then not giving it any TLC for 10 years.
And you wonder why. Look rubbish. They do need that ongoing maintenance. And my view on timber windows is you've got to be prepared to commit, say, for the first 10 years, so okay, every 3 years, we give it another coat of paint. Once that's built up, you've got a window that it will stand the test of time. But yeah, worth pointing out, does need that ongoing maintenance. 3 to 5 years in between coats of paint is probably realistic.
Yeah, look, that's a sort of separate discussion on its own because and maybe we won't get bogged down on that one just yet. But it can vary depending on where you live, depending on what type of coating you use on your timber. It can vary from once every 12 months to never.
If you're on the coast?
Yeah, if you are right on the beach, there is nothing that you're going to get that's not going to need you to maintain those windows all the time.
Whatever material.
If you're
right on the coast, salt air,
100%.
on the gaskets, on the aluminium, on the glass, on any building material.
If you're on the beach and you're getting sea spray all the time, I guarantee that if you don't maintain these windows and like every 3 months at least, you've got to clean them and get all the salt content out of it. If you don't, your aluminium will pit. Now, it's not going to fall apart, but it'll look like dirt.
And that's true of any building material on the coast.
Sure.
That's probably the most extreme environment that we build in.
Correct. And then on the other extreme, if you've got a beautiful 5 or 6 meter lift and slide door in your backyard and it's completely undercover, it's never going to need maintenance.
It's going to last forever without any maintenance.
Correct.
Yeah, and look, that's often the case also. We'll often have 1 or 2 windows that are completely covered up by an alfresco area, and that in those cases they will last forever.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I guess we should probably wrap it up about there. That's been a pretty healthy discussion. I hope that's had a lot of useful information for you guys if you're about to embark on designing your house and choosing a window. I guess the theory is choose wisely, do lots of research, and have lots of discussions with your window supplier, your architect, your builder. Bring those 3 together and say, okay, what's going to tick every box for us here? And then have the expectations set for you as well. So if you're going down the timber path, you do need to do the maintenance. But it's about making those informed decisions early on.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you get informed? You ask questions, ask the right questions. So U value, SSGC, air infiltration, very, very important. Ask for the design drawings, and whenever possible, and it may not always be possible for everyone, go out and actually have a look at it.
Yeah, always.
Have a look at the physical products.
Yep.
If you can, and if your supplier is willing, ask to see how they actually put it together. Maybe get a quick tour of the factory. You will pretty quickly form an opinion as to the nature and the quality of what you're about to commit to.
As a minimum, go to the showroom.
Yeah.
But also, it's worth noting there's plenty of open house days, getting around, particularly in Melbourne at the moment, where you can just walk in on a Saturday. Someone will open up a house midway through construction. You can see all this as well. So all part of the research phase before you build.
Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks for joining us, Andre.
Pleasure, mate.